The Bible speaks about a time when the nation of Israel will be restored to the land after a lengthy exile. Every word that I just said is a fact today. And every person of biblical faith has to recognize the fact that future prophecies of the end times in the Bible, not all of them, the story's not over, but those future prophecies are now no longer in the future tense, they're in the present. One of the things that we're seeing is this strange marriage between the progressive left and Islamic fundamentalists, Islamic extremists. And it seems so strange. Like, what do these two groups have in common? And you know, you've probably seen on the internet people crack jokes about things like Queers for Palestine, and about how everyone knows that a lot of these progressives, if they were in the Gaza Strip, would be probably thrown off a rooftop. You know, so there's this unique new kind of anti-Semitism. This isn't Nazi Germany. People are comparing it to Nazi Germany, but it's a different thing. And how do we as people of faith understand this dynamic? Like, how do these two groups get together? But I think if we just take a step back as people of biblical faith and think about what they have in common, it all makes perfect sense. That these two groups, the progressive liberal left, they call themselves liberal, the progressive left, and the Muslims, both do not believe that our Bible is true, and they both reject the idea of the God of the Bible as the true God. And throughout the Bible, God tells us over and over again that the way to know that he is the Lord, that phrase in the Bible, they will know that I am the Lord, is over and over again, almost every time in the Bible, is in the context of the restoration of the people of Israel after a 2,000-year exile in the land. Because God declares over and over again in the Bible that prophecy, the most repeated prophecy in the Bible, of the restoration of the nation of Israel after thousands of years of exile, is the greatest evidence of God's dominion over history. That's how we know who he is. And somehow our enemies, deep down, they know that. And they know that if the Jewish people today are restored after a lengthy exile to the land of Israel, that the God of Israel is true and the Bible is true, and they must stand against it.
You just recorded a video saying the time is now, directed in specific to Bible-believing Christians. You just laid it out. This is a heavy, heavy spiritual battle. And we've had Christians for years, including here on TBN, standing with Israel and the Jewish people. But now is where the rubber hits the road, as they say, and you laid that out. What is your message for Christians, number one, in these times as Israel and the Jewish people are under assault? And why is now so different? You said even different than Nazi Germany in some respects.
Yeah, look, when I said in that video that this is the time, let me explain fully what I meant here, because, you know, people hear lots of sermons, like someone will quote a verse from the Bible and use it as a metaphor for some lesson in our lives. That's not what this is about. The Bible speaks about a time when the nation of Israel will be restored to the land after a lengthy exile. Moses lays it out in Deuteronomy 30. Even if you are scattered to the ends of the heavens, from there the Lord your God will gather you in, and you will be brought back to the land, and will take possession of it and become more numerous and more prosperous than your ancestors. Those verses in the Bible, written in the future tense, that our great-grandparents and all the generations before us of Bible-believing people read them as a future tense prophecy of the end times. Every word that I just said is a fact today. And every person of biblical faith has to recognize the fact that future prophecies of the end times in the Bible, not all of them, the story's not over, but those future prophecies are now no longer in the future tense, they're in the present. And the Bible says repeatedly that when the nation of Israel is restored, there will be among the nations those who rise up against us, those who try to prevent that restoration of Israel in this land. So right now, the people of Israel are in the land. We are more numerous and more prosperous than ever before, which wasn't true in 1948. It wasn't true even in 1973 at the Yom Kippur War. This is the first war of annihilation against the nation of Israel at a time when we have inherited the land and are ingathered and are more numerous and more prosperous. And therefore, Christians must understand this isn't a Sunday morning sermon. This isn't a metaphor for something else. This is the simple meaning of the text, that this war right now is the war that was talked about in the Bible. Now, someone might say, wait a second, Rabbi, are you like reading the tea leaves and saying this is the end of days? Who knows the mind of God? You're right. If this isn't the war that the Bible talks about, that means we're saying that at some point in the future, under these similar circumstances, there's going to be another one just like it. What I'm saying is that as people of faith, we have to treat this as though it's a war in the Bible because it kind of looks like it is. Like Zechariah in chapter 8, that normal life has returned to Jerusalem. And the nations of the world are streaming to Jerusalem to seek God. And we see that with millions of Christians every year coming to Israel, standing alongside the people of Israel. These prophecies of the future, which seemed impossible. A Jew listening to Zechariah 3,000 years ago, being told the nations of the world are going to come to Jerusalem to be with us. The movement of Christians who stand alongside Israel, who stand up and say, I stand with Israel, are themselves a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. That's Zechariah chapter 2. Many nations will be joined to me in that day and will become my people, together with the nation of Israel. So Christians have to realize that this isn't a Jewish fight and you're rooting for us and you're cheering for us on the sidelines. This is a fight for the truth of the Bible. Look, if Israel loses this war, if Hezbollah comes in at some point, and let's say the worst case scenario happens and Israel's wiped off the map, you know what that means? That means that the Bible is false. That means that the Bible's false. Now, obviously, we're going to all say, well, of course, that can't happen. I guess that means that victory is assured. But we have to fight for it. The people of Israel were going to be saved when the Egyptians were coming after them. We knew that God didn't take them out of Egypt just to have them die on the banks of the Red Sea. But when Moses said to the people, right before the sea split, he said, stand and see the salvation of God. God is going to redeem you. And God says to Moses, Moses, it's right there in the text, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to go. Now that verse always struck me as strange, almost absurd. What do you mean, why are you crying out to me? Imagine, Eric, you're in terrible trouble, you're in the worst crisis, the enemy is approaching, and you cry out to God. And God says to you, Eric, why are you crying out to me? What do you mean, why am I crying out to you? You're God. I'm in trouble, I'm crying out to God. What else am I supposed to do? But God says, look, I'm going to make the sea split. I'm going to bring redemption. But it's not going to happen until you move forward. And that's my message to Christians today. This is not a Jewish fight. We're on the front lines because the way God shows his dominion over history is through the prophetic and impossible history of the people of Israel. And that's why the most repeated prophecy in the Bible is that of the exile, the scattering of this tiny people around the world for many, many generations, and the ultimate restoration to our land. And then God says over and over again, and that's how you'll know that I am the Lord, because the history of the people of Israel testifies to the dominion of God. And our enemies are fighting tooth and nail to prevent that testimony from becoming a reality.
Talk about your personal stake in this. Not only do you live in Israel, obviously, but this Israel-Hamas war, which, as you said, may expand. You've got loved ones on the front lines, quite literally. Tell us about your personal stake in all of this.
Eric, thank you for asking about that. You know, I'm sitting here obviously with you now in a studio in the United States. Getting on that plane to come over here was very difficult. But I knew that is what I have to do. I have to come here and speak to you and speak to your audience. I have 8 children. 3 of my children, 2 of my sons and my daughter, who's a combat medic, are all on the front lines or beyond. They're all in fighting units. And my son-in-law, who is father to my upcoming first grandchild, my daughter is expecting. My son-in-law thank you. My son-in-law is an officer in a combat unit as well. And they're all there fighting. And they're all there on the front lines, and we're living on knife's edge. We're waiting every day for a text message when they have a few minutes where they're allowed to communicate home and tell us they're okay. And every day, I'm praying for my 3 kids and my son-in-law. And every day I'm thinking about what this means in terms of the type of sacrifices that we need to make to achieve victory. Because one thing's for sure, our enemies are willing to die so that we will die.
That's right.
That's what all that suicide bombing all these years has been about. They're willing to lay it on the line to destroy us. And we need to be willing to lay it on the line to win.
We have about 30 seconds left, Pesach. Do the people of Israel feel the support of Christians around the world, including here in the United States? Can you feel it? Is that tangible? Does it help put wind in your sails?
Right now, the Jewish world, many of whom were often skeptical about this, are realizing that it's us and the Christians. The Christians are the most steadfast supporters Israel has, and we need the Christian world. And one last thing, if I could just make a quick point. The Christian world has numbers, something the Jews will never have. And if you think that you're not involved in this war, every Christian must realize you are a combatant, because the main war here is the information war. Our enemies are putting out all kinds of false information, and we need Christians to step up, to have those rallies, to put out information, to share all the right information, to combat what our enemies are doing, and that will give a back to the Israeli army, to my kids, to do what we have to do to defeat this